You've probably seen the Toby Fox newsletters in the sections not about Undertale or Deltarune, where he talks about all of the musical side quests he's been completing, making songs for Pokemon games and Sega and a bunch of other stuff. Some people look at these collabs and say, bro's really doing anything other than making Deltarune. Yup. I mean, looking at a lot of his collaborations outside of his own games, he mainly writes melodies for other people to arrange and produce into full songs. But a story that caught my eye was regarding Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Toby Fox directly composed and arranged the endgame Area Zero tracks, including the final boss battle of the game. But Toby also said that one of his melodies was, to his surprise, arranged into a bunch of different songs throughout the game, essentially becoming the main theme. Turns out it's not just listeners who like Toby Fox's style, apparently. Arrangers seem to like working with his melodies, as evidenced by things like Game Freak commandeering his motif for a bigger role in the Scarlet Violet soundtrack. It makes me wonder though, what makes Toby Fox's melodies so special? To answer that question, we have to talk a little bit about music theory. And I know right now there are about 2 people popping off at the mention of theory, and everyone else just knows the word leitmotif from Undertale and Hamilton. Motif is basically another word for pattern, and in music that is usually a pattern of notes that make up a melody. Motifs are, technically speaking, the smallest pattern of notes that can be considered a unique musical idea. We then spam these motifs everywhere and make slight changes to them each time, which I'll refer to as motific variations. And this is how melodies and songs are made. This is a motif. This is a variation. And what follows are further variations on that motif. So if we're trying to figure out what makes Toby Fox's melodies great, we should probably understand the different aspects of a motif. If I asked you to name such an aspect, the first thing that might come to mind is the key. The key essentially tells you a root note and then a bunch of other notes that you can play to not sound bad. It's important information to know, but it's more like the multiplication tables, as in it's kind of boring to talk about. As to not bore you to death, I'm going to be talking less about rules in this video and more about techniques that you can creatively apply because, music is an art form, not just like math. So let's speedrun this. I just placed a bunch of notes here. Astute viewers may realize that it's just a straight line of the same note over and over. To make things more interesting, we move the notes up and down. This is the contour of the motif, telling you which notes go up and which go down. This is a pretty uninteresting contour. To make your melodies more unique, you probably want your contour to be more distinct. Now, we know when the notes go up and down, but how far does each one travel? These are the motif's intervals, the relative distance in pitch between each note measured in semitones. This interval is 1 semitone down, and now it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 semitones down. As with contour, you typically want your motif's intervals not to be boring and samey. With contour and intervals, we can essentially define the motif almost entirely. Even if I move all these notes up so that the motif starts on a completely different note, the up-down motion and the distance between each note stays the same, and as such, our pattern of notes is still intact. There's one other thing I'll talk about that can give a motif its identity: rhythm. To explain why rhythm matters,
did you know that these 4 notes are the same as these 4 notes?
Just like contour and intervals, rhythm can help us further arrange our notes into a unique pattern. And just like that, we have a completely original motif. Okay, enough of this music nerd talk. Let's get back to a not nerdy discussion of how these principles are applied to video game music. A good motif can be changed around and used in different musical contexts while remaining recognizable. The example everybody likes to use from Undertale is Heartache and Asgore. Despite how Asgore messes with the rhythm of this melody by putting it in a 4/4 time signature, the leitmotif remains recognizable from its contour and intervals. An even cooler example, though, is Sands, and It's Raining Somewhere Else. As you can see, the intervals between each of them have changed quite a bit, and combined with the different key, there aren't even a lot of the same notes. But Sans's motif has a distinct enough rhythm and contour that you can still pick up on it, and even consider it the same musical idea. Let's take a look at one of Toby Fox's contributions from Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, the Terra Raid battle theme, and we can dissect how he establishes a motif and constructs a melody around it. So we could consider this the main motif, the smallest identifiable musical idea that establishes itself as a recurring pattern. Note its rhythm, it's not just 4/4 notes, right? The contour and its intervals. This motif is repeated throughout this section with minor variations in between, comprising the section's main melody. And these variations aren't arbitrary either. For example, this part at the end is mimicking the main rhythm of the original motif. You can look at the contour of the motif as a whole too, and see how the overall down, up pattern is echoed throughout its variations. Down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Overall, Toby Fox is essentially elaborating on the ideas of the motif in each of its variations. Moving on to the next section, which I'll be calling the B section. We've changed up quite a bit just to keep things interesting, introducing a seemingly new musical idea right here at the beginning, but this bit at the end still echoes the original motif's characteristics. Putting all of the new stuff right here in the context of the main motif. You can find echoes of the main motif's contour towards the middle of this section. And the ending of this melody perfectly quotes the ending of the A section. Essentially, Toby explores all sorts of new ideas throughout this song, but then goes on to relate them back to the main motif. Kind of like exploring an idea in a body paragraph of an essay, going through a piece of evidence, and then showing how it relates back to your main thesis. The B section repeats again, of course, but it has a sort of varied ending that flows more naturally into the C section. In the C section, we basically introduce a new motif, or a new pattern that repeats and is elaborated on. And while this section might sound pretty different, check this out. This is how the previous section ends. And this is how the C section ends. It's the exact same notes here and here, with some variations in the notes leading up to it to fit the current chord and to make for a smoother transition. And what's more interesting is that this B section ending is actually just a variation of what came earlier in the B section, this part right here, which is a quote of the ending of the A section, which itself echoes the original motif. And so we have the ship of Theseus before us, as this song gradually changes elements of the original motif to make it work in the context of the current section. But this transition was pretty smooth and easy to follow. It's just like a well-written character arc in which a character develops and undergoes changes, which you can follow along easily and also trace everything back to the beginning. And this just goes to show the most valuable part of motifs like this, motifs like the ones Toby Fox makes. You can change a lot about them without completely losing their identity. The contour, intervals, and rhythm are distinct enough that you can mess with one or even more of these properties and the motif still remains recognizable. Just like we saw earlier with Sans' motif, it was used in two completely different genres of song, but its distinct contour and rhythm allows it to retain its motific identity. In this way, you could say the motif is dynamic. This explains then why the main Pokemon composers would want to use Toby Fox's melodies as significant themes throughout the soundtrack. He just makes it easy for them to do so. Toby Fox's melodies are so dynamic that you can repurpose and recontextualize them for all sorts of situations. And that's just the Area Zero motif. I would show you a montage of the main Paldea and Academy theme quotes throughout the soundtrack, but that is genuinely just too much of a daunting task for me to spend time on. At the end of the day, what you should take away from this video if you're a composer is to write your melodies with a distinct contour, rhythm, and intervals. A good motif can be Ship of Theseus apart for many applications throughout a song or throughout a soundtrack while still remaining identifiable. And of course, Toby Fox is in no way the first person to pioneer this strat. It's genuinely just good music theory practice that many great composers take part in. I encourage you to go throughout your favorite soundtracks and, try and analyze some of your favorite motifs and melodies. I think Toby Fox just does it so consistently and effectively that it's basically become a part of his brand as a composer. But it also makes it easy to replicate his style, as many good Undertale and Deltarune fan compositions have. Including me, by the way. You can check out the music I've composed for an indie game currently in development with the link in the description. It pays homage to Toby and a bunch of other composers whose styles I've tried to replicate. Okay, real quick. Hi, I'm Chris, by the way. Not the guy from Deltarune, but that's actually my name. I recorded this video way before I started the channel, and so at the end of it, I'm like, it'd be really cool if we get 1,000 subscribers before chapters 3 and 4 come out, which is what I said last week in the first video. Turns out we already hit that. Turns out you guys blew that goal out of the water in like 4 days, and we're now close to 2,000 subscribers as I'm recording this on like Wednesday. So that's really cool. Thank you guys, and everybody who hit the subscribe button, but also statistically that probably isn't you. So subscribe, because I'm going to be uploading on this channel every single Friday. Also, if you're still here and you didn't instinctually click off upon seeing my face, you may be interested to know that I have started a Discord server and a Patreon. The Discord server is just so we can, have more of a community, be nice in there. And the Patreon is just if you want to directly support the channel and the content. I know it's weird to ask this out, it's like the second video, but I'm also a broke college student, and just giving me like $1 a month is way more helpful than watching 1,000 years of YouTube ads. Like, genuinely, YouTube ad revenue is terrible, especially because I'm actually not yet monetized, because you need 3 videos to do that, and this is video number 2. So yeah, Discord server, Patreon, all that good stuff. Thanks for watching the video, thanks for sticking around, and I'll see you guys next week.